When I was a kid, my favorite type of pasta was capelli d'angelo. Sometimes known as angel hair pasta, it's like spaghetti but maybe twice as thin, and it goes beautifully with a nice light tomato sauce or some butter or... Anyway, point is, chemists from London have made pasta so thin that it makes angel hair look like, well, like a really, really, really thick noodle. But why and how and... No, yeah, why? Nanopasta is two kinds of nanomaterial at once. It is a nanostarch, yep, just a little starch, teeny tiny carbohydrate, in a nanofiber form factor. Starches are just plain versatile, useful little polymers. In fact, after cellulose, starches are the second most abundant biomass material in the world. Thank you, plants. Plants use them for energy, and as the whole pasta thing might suggest, so do we. But scientists don't make starches all nano-sized just so we can have very, very tiny snacks. The most common use of nanostarches is in food, but often in an auxiliary capacity. Nanostarches can stabilize emulsions, mixtures of liquids that don't want to stay mixed, and is sometimes used to replace fat content. But nanostarches also have utility beyond their use in food. In our bodies, starch content can increase intestinal permeability, but starches also increase cellular permeability for microbes. As a result, nanostarches are actually pretty effective antimicrobial agents. They can even be used as filler and reinforcer in biocomposites, like bioplastics, improving their heat resistance and durability. You can even use them in edible packaging, which, I mean, not how I dispose of packaging personally, but who am I to yucky yum? Nanofibers, on the other hand, are made of all sorts of things. We make synthetic nanofibers out of things like polyurethane and polylactic acid. That's the plastic used in filament for 3D printing. But our bodies also make nanofibers. Collagen, for instance, is the most abundant protein in our whole bodies, lending structure to all our tissues, and lo and behold, it is a noodly little nanofiber. Biodegradable and biocompatible nanofibers can be used to create tissue scaffolds to repair and replace those structural components. Which bring us to nanopasta. It's one of those biodegradable materials that can be used for tissue engineering, but our immune systems don't get aggro at starches the way they sometimes do with protein or peptide nanofibers. And the form factor of a nanofiber is great when you're creating a scaffold for something like bone to regenerate. They can also be used to encapsulate pharmaceuticals and probiotics that might not go where they need to go if they were free-floating without a protective layer. But like other nanofibers and nanostarches in general, this has potential non-biomedical applications as well. A mat of nanonoodles can act as a filter that let nanometer-sized particles through but block everything larger. We use nanofilters for water softening as well as filtering some juices, pharmaceuticals. When you want stuff filtered down to incredibly fine particles, but you don't want to go full reverse osmosis. The high surface area and efficient electron transport of nanofibers can also make them good supercapacitor electrodes, which instead of batteries or traditional capacitors are energy storage systems for things like regenerative brakes in cars and wind turbines, uninterruptible power supplies, and all sorts of miscellaneous uses. So that's why nanopasta. But now, how nanopasta? This is one of those protocols where each aspect of it's been done before, but it's the putting it all together that offers a novel spin. Specifically, scientists have made starch nanofibers before by this method. Like a lot of nanofibers, they're produced by electrospinning. The basic principle was discovered by William Gilbert in 1628, and electrospinning was demonstrated in the late 19th century by C.V. Boyce. The idea is that you have liquid in a reservoir and apply voltage to a needle or similar. You get the reservoir pump going, and the electrostatic repulsion overcomes the surface tension of the fluid, and you get a jet. It's not the only way to create polymer nanofibers, but it's by far the most common. Scientists have previously used electrospinning to make nanofibers from starches like cornstarch, as well as hybrids of starches and other polymers. The innovation here is the wheat flour, which hadn't been used as a polymer for electrospun nanofibers before. Strictly speaking, they're using white flour but not pure starch in this study, which adds a little bit to the challenge. The idea here is that purifying the flour into pure starch is energy and water expensive, and for most use cases it doesn't have to be pure starch. You can have a little bit of hemicellulose here and there and it's okay. Or if you need it to be purified, for instance, if you need to remove the gluten, then that's an extra step you can do before the rest of this. Maybe with some slight modifications, because it's the little bits of non-starch in the flour that make the whole project a little more challenging for our chemists. As we saw from that little electrospinning cartoon, you need a liquid for this to work, which flour, notably, is not. The only solvent they could get to work was formic acid, which is an organic acid that's in all sorts of plants and insects, from ants, hence the formic name, to pineapples and eggplants. So, after a little bit of finagling the particulars, they get the flour into solution in the formic acid, and then they do the electrospinning, which, now that I'm looking at it, has a certain sort of pendulum painting sort of vibe to it. But instead of a pendulum painting, you get a mat of nanofibers that end up looking something like this. At least, this is how it looks on scanning electron microscopy, because this scale is too small to show on an optical microscope. The thinnest fibers are just 100 nanometer, thickest about 600, with an average of 372 nanometers width. And ultimately, as the authors tell us, it's a fiber, it's extruded in an electrospinning kind of sense, and it's dried flour. So, in keeping with what we've been calling it the whole time, this wheat flour-derived starch nanofiber really does count as pasta lunga, or long pasta. Honestly, this is more pasta than a Pop-Tart is a calzone, or a hot dog is a taco, or a breakfast cereal is a soup, or whatever cursed food taxonomy they come up with next. And yes, this has real applications, as we've discussed, but no, they're serious about the pasta part. This paper is citing the Encyclopedia of Pasta. They're calculating the width of angel hair pasta in micrometers, 800 if you're curious. They're even citing the thinnest pasta made by hand, su filindeu, or threads of God pasta, that's half the width of angel hair and made in the town of Nuoro, Sardinia, population 36,000. And yet, with all respect to that world's rarest pasta, these chemists point out that they have made a thinner pasta lunga by 1,000 times. And if I didn't know any better, I'd think maybe they're a little competitive. They do report the typical pasta preparation protocols. Dried fibers, refluxed in 0.1 to 0.3 mole sodium chloride aqueous solution, leading to swelling of amylopectin lamellae and subsequent unwinding of the amylopectin helices upon hydration, facilitating digestion. You know, you boil the pasta in salt water so you can eat it. Truly, not a single soul trolls harder than scientists. But it does touch on the question, frankly, that I think we all want to know. Can we eat the nanopasta? Can? Absolutely. Again, part of the point of this is it's a biocompatible, non-toxic substance. If it were toxic, you couldn't use it for the biomedical use cases our chemists are proposing. And even though the authors report that excess formic acid was removed as part of the process, the flour is still formulated to some extent. And while I know the taste of flour, and I've at least read about the taste of formic acid, vaguely citrusy, there's no guarantee that it tastes anything like the sum of its parts, because that's chemistry, baby. But the most unfortunate caveat about the nanopasta is that we really didn't make that much of it. Look how that little nanopasta is in their fingers. It's like licking a postage stamp worth by the time we're all done. So, until we can replicate this protocol at home, the taste of nanopasta must remain a mystery. In the meantime, I am going to work on my nano marinara recipe, just in case.